Hi everyone, I'm Abby here with Yucandu Art Studio in Webster Groves, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create this amazing photo mosaic plaque project. This is a project that makes a wonderful gift, whether you make it and give it as a finished product or you give someone a kit so they can commemorate their own special moment with a mosaic like this one. I really love this project. It's a great way to preserve one of your favorite photos in an artistic and handmade and heartfelt way. This is a project, it's a little tricky, it does take some time, and unfortunately it is one that we don't recommend for kids, just because we are going to be using these clear tiles here, and these ones are glass and they have very, very sharp edges. They're not polished or anything, so that is why we don't recommend this project for kids. However, I do really believe in you guys, and I am so excited to show you how to make this project today. So first I'm going to go over the materials that you are going to need for this project. If you're making this using our kit, you'll have your wooden plaque. This is what we're going to be putting everything on. You're going to need your tiles, both your clear tiles, these ones I have here, and then your colored tiles, your opaque tiles. So the clear ones will go over the photo like this, and the opaque ones are going to go as decorations around the edges. You're also going to need your weld bond glue. That's why it has a little WB. That's the brand we use here at Yucandu. This is what we're going to be using to glue the photo down and glue all of our tiles down. You are also going to need your grouting supplies. So you will need some of your grout. That's this powdery stuff. Grout is going to fill in the cracks between the tiles right here. It's going to give it that really nice, finished, polished, professional look. And then other things you'll need for grouting, you'll need this little phone book paper, this nice cotton cloth, a popsicle stick, and then these two toothpicks, which we are going to use in grouting and also at other parts of the project. The other thing you are going to need is your paint, and that should be in your kit as well. The paint is going to go on the edges and on the back just to finish it off. Now there are some other things that you're going to need for your kit that are not included in the kit that we sell at Yucandu. You are going to need your photo, obviously. This is a photo of me and some of my friends when we were in 5th grade. And we can print this out for you here at Yucandu. It's really important that the photo is printed on a very high quality paper and that it's printed using permanent ink. This is really, really important because we don't want your photo getting damaged by the glue or the grout or anything that you're putting on top of it. So it is important that it's printed on a high quality paper with permanent ink, so you don't want to just use a normal glossy photo. You don't want to do that. We can print that out for you here at Yucandu in the size 4x6 or 5x7. You can just email it to us at art@yucandu.com and we will be happy to print it out for you and include it in your kit. Another thing you are going to need is a paintbrush. We sell these here at Yucandu for $3.95. For this project, we recommend that you use a 1/2 inch flat brush. And then something else you're going to need is a little disposable cup. This will be used to mix your grout in. And then it's a good idea to have some wet wipes on hand for this project. Since we're going to be touching the glue and touching the grout a lot, it's a good idea to have some wet wipes on hand just to keep everything clean. Now something that you don't need for this project, but you might want to have, are some glass and tile cutting tools. So these are the ones that we use here at Yucandu. These are tile lippers. We'll use these to cut the opaque tiles. And then you might also need a scoring tool like this, and then these running pliers. These are used to cut the glass. Now these are not necessary for this project, but I will give you a quick demo in case you want to use them. And as I said, we do sell them here at Yucandu, so you can totally come to our store or order them online to pick them up. Alright, so those are all the materials that you are going to need for this project. First, I'm going to set up my workspace so that I can glue my photo down. Okay, so now I am all set up and ready to glue my photo down. I've got my glue here with me, I've got my paintbrush, and then I've got some wet wipes on hand just in case. So what I'm going to do first is line up where I want my photo to go, just kind of figure it out. I'd like it to be about in the middle here. Something you can do is take a pencil and mark the corners just so you know where to put it after we put the glue on. Alright, so I'm going to take that off. I'm going to take my glue, take my paintbrush, dip it in there, and you're just going to spread a very thin layer over where you want the photo to go. You don't want it to be too thick, and you really want it to be nice and even. You don't want it to be super clumpy in one spot and have like no glue in another spot. because then the photo is just going to kind of stick down all lumpy, and then it will be hard to put your tiles on. Okay, so now that that layer is all painted, I'm going to take my photo and line it back up with my marks. And then I'm just going to press it down. It's a good idea to press from the middle outwards. That helps get a lot of air bubbles out. And then something you can do to kind of help smooth it out is take an old credit card or gift card like this one we have at Yucandu and just really spread it to the edges. You don't want to spread too harshly because that might cause paper to rip just because there's glue underneath it, so it's a little bit more damp. You want to make sure it's pressed down nice and secure because we are going to be putting tiles on top of this, and we want it to be super duper flat. So there we go. That looks like it's pretty good. It won't take too long to dry. I'm still going to give it a minute or two. And then if you did have any glue squirting out the side, you can just take your wet wipe and clean that right up there. And then something else you want to make sure you do is get your brush washed. Make sure you wash it off really nicely because we don't want the glue to get on there and for it to dry and get all sticky and everything. So wash this off because we are going to be using it later. And then we're just going to give this a second to dry, and then after it's dry, we will be putting the clear tiles on top of the photo. So now that my glue underneath my photo is dry, I am ready to start putting the clear tiles on top of the photo. So you can see, like on this one, this is what we're going to be doing to our project, adding these clear tiles on first. So the first thing we're going to do is lay them all out because there are some pretty important rules and directions for laying them out before we start gluing them down. The first thing you want to do when you're laying these out is make sure you emphasize all the really important parts of your photo. So for this one, it would be like the heads, and you see how they got it in this one too. So the first thing you want to do is put clear tiles over all of the heads in your photo. I'm going to hold it up a little bit so you can see it. I'm going to put one there, and there, and there. So you want to make sure you get all the heads first. And I'll show you why this is important. Because when we put the tiles on, there are going to be little cracks between the tiles that we are going to fill with grout. And you don't want one of these cracks going through the middle of someone's head because then a bunch of their head will be cut off. So we really don't want that for our project. So that's why it's important to go through and get the heads first. So after you've got all the heads of your project, you can definitely go through and emphasize other things. So I really like the hand gesture that she's making here, the little rock symbol. So I want to emphasize that. And then after you've emphasized those really important points, you can just kind of go through and add tiles over the rest of the project. Now it's important that you make sure you keep the spaces between the tiles pretty thin. You just want a teeny tiny bit of space between them so that the grout can still go in between the tiles. And usually we recommend a toothpick space. I would even say a teeny bit smaller than that. You want grout to be able to go in, but you really don't want that much space between the tile because then you'll be kind of covering up a lot of your photo with grout, and you don't want that to happen. So I'm gonna go through on mine and just make sure that the spaces between the tiles are very small. And then another thing to remember is to make sure you place your tiles not so that they're on the wood. So when you place your tile, you don't want to place it like this because then we're going to be able to see through to the wood, and no one really wants to see the wood. They're more interested in your photo. Another thing to remember is that your photo, the tiles don't have to be perfectly linear around the photo. They don't need to go to every edge of the photo and be perfect like that. You'll notice that our example here has kind of a funky frame, and I think that makes it look really neat and cool. And another thing to remember is that this is a handmade project. This is not made by a machine. So there are going to be some little imperfections or irregularities or something, and I think that's part of what makes it so beautiful is the fact that it's handmade and you can tell that it was handmade. So what I'm going to do is continue laying out all my clear tiles over the photo, and once they are all laid out, all ready to go, I'm going to come back and start gluing them. And then if you do happen to have these tools, we can use those on this part of the project. So if you don't use them, that's okay. You can just skip forward to after you've laid all the tiles down. But if you do, I'm going to show you how to use them now. So say I wanted this one to be cut a little bit. What you would do is you would take this tool, this scoring tool, you would hold it like this, and you're going to press it down along the line where you want it. So press it down really firmly first and make a mark. So now you'll see that there's a little line there. That's called a score mark. And then you're going to take these. These are called running pliers. And at Yucandu, we have a little mark on ours that shows the center. You're going to line that mark up with the score mark. And then you want to put this in a plastic bag. That's what I'm going to do. You're going to squeeze. And then it's going to break into 2 nice pieces. So you can use those as little fragments on your piece. So that's just a suggestion for you. Remember, we do sell these in our store. So if you'd really like to use one, you are welcome to purchase them at Yucandu. So I'm going to continue laying my tiles over my picture, and I will come back when I have finished with that part. All right, so now my tiles are all laid out. I've got all these clear ones laid out on my project. So I know it's probably a little hard to see from your video, but I've taken this picture here so you can see the tiles kind of with the reflection, so you can see about how far apart they are, and you'll be able to hopefully see like where they're gonna fall over the faces. I'm gonna try and do a quick little zoom in. There you go. Hopefully you can see that okay. All right, so now that those are all placed and ready to go, it's time to start gluing them down. So this is going to be the trickiest and longest step of the project. It requires a lot of detail and a lot of precision, but I really believe in you. I think you can do this. It's going to turn out so amazing. So the first thing we're going to do is you really want to be careful, but you want to take out your first tile that you want to glue down. So I'm going to do the one that's over her head here. And then what you want to do, you're going to polish this tile and you're going to clean it like you would a pair of glasses. So first you're going to breathe on it really quick to fog it up. That's what I'm going to do. And then you're going to take your cotton cloth and polish it really well. You can hold it up to the light just to make sure you've got those little smudge marks off. All right, so now that this one is all polished and clean, we're going to take it and you want to hold it by the corners. And so since it was down this way, I'm going to flip it over in my hand. You're going to hold it by the corners. And then you're going to dip your finger in glue. So just get a little bit of glue on your finger. I know this is kind of the dirty part. This is why you want to have a wet wipe handy too. And then you're just going to spread the glue on the back of the tile. So this is the really, really important part. You want to make sure you get a super nice, even layer of glue. It's very important to get an even layer of glue because if there's not, you might get some air bubbles that look weird over the faces or anything like that. So you really don't want that. And then after you've got it that far, you can switch your finger so you can get the other corner. You want it going all the way out to the edges. You don't just want a big glop in the middle and then nothing on the edges because that will create some air bubbles and we really don't want that. And the reason you don't want to do this with a brush is because that will leave brush marks, and then when it dries, you'll still be able to see the brush marks on your photo. And you don't need a ton, you just need a thin, nice, even layer. So now that I've got mine like that, you can kind of see there's still a couple parts that need smoothing out. I'm going to flip it over, and then I usually like to wash my finger off here so that I don't get any glue on top of the tile or on other parts of my project. And then what you're going to do is carefully place the tile back where you had it. Okay, now that it's placed, I'm going to wash my fingers off even more, and then you're just going to press down. You want to press it down very thoroughly and very evenly. So this is a point you might be able to see some air bubbles show up in your project. And if you do, just keep pressing them, pressing down the tile until those air bubbles go away. You want to press down, you want to be gentle, but you also want to be pretty firm with this. And you'll notice that it is still super milky and white and translucent and you can't see all the way through it. And that might be a little bit scary right now, but don't worry because it will dry clear. It is going to dry like this one here. And it might take some time. It might even take overnight to dry. All right, so now that we've got that one down, I'm going to do another one just so you can watch me do it again. So I'm going to do this one on the side here. So got the tile, breathe on it to fog it up, and then polish it with your cloth. You can hold it up to the light to check it out to make sure there are no more smudges on it. And you do also want to be careful because this glass is sharp and it's not polished or tumbled or anything. So just be extra careful when you're doing this part. This is the part, this is why we don't really recommend it for kids. All right, so now that's polished, remember, flip it over, dip your finger in glue, and just start spreading that glue onto the back of the tile. So you do have to do this individually for every tile, and this is the part that does take a long time. But it's really important that you really try and do it well, because that is what's going to make your project look so amazing, is the heart and soul that you put into it. All right, so now that the glue's on that, I'm going to wash my finger off. Place my tile back where I had it. And press down. And there you go. So just like that. And then if you do get any glue that's squirting out a little bit, you can just take one of your toothpicks, got mine up here, and just kind of get that glue out of the cracks, because you really don't want a bunch of glue in these cracks, because remember, we still have to put the grout in there. All right, so you're just going to continue doing this for all of your clear tiles. Make sure you be extra careful when you're handling the glass. Make sure you really press down thoroughly. You get an even layer of glue on the backs of the clear tiles. And remember, this is going to be the trickiest part. So just get through this part, and then I promise you it is going to get a lot easier after this. So I'm going to continue gluing my tiles down, and you can come back to the video when yours are done too. Phew, all right, now I am done with gluing the clear tiles down. So that took a long time, that was a lot of work, but I applaud you guys for doing it. You'll see that the tiles I glued down most recently, these ones over here, are still kind of white and milky looking, whereas the tiles that I glued down first, like these ones over here, are already clear. So you can already see those starting to dry, and they're going to continue to dry throughout the rest of the time that I'm working on it and overnight. All right, so we are done with the toughest part. That was really tricky, and I'm sure it took a lot of time and a lot of attention to detail, but I'm sure you guys did awesome. Now, sometimes this is the part of the project where you look at it and you're like, that doesn't look that good. And please don't think that, because I think it already looks amazing, and I'm really excited to see how it turns out. I know it doesn't look that great because you've just got these tiles on and you've still got all this wood around, and some of your faces might be covered up from this milky white glue, but it is going to turn out just as awesome as this one. So the next step is going to be gluing these colorful tiles down to give it some more pop. And to do that, so it's really still up to you, there are some important things to remember when you are gluing the tiles down. So if you have a tile like this one, a tile that has a bumpy side and a smooth side, you want to make sure to glue it bumpy side down. That is going to help it stick a little bit better, and that'll just make sure that everything is nice and neat and really stuck down. And then for these ones, you want to make sure your tiles are about a toothpick space apart. You can even use your toothpick to check. And you want to make sure that they're also about a toothpick space apart from your tiles, your clear tiles here. And then while you're doing these ones, if you do happen to have a pair of these tile nippers, here is how to use them. So you'll take your tile, and these tiles like to be cut symmetrically, so they like to be cut in half. So you could do that diagonally like this, or you could do it vertically or horizontally like this. Whatever way you want to do it, line it up, just hold it in your tiles, and then you're going to stick your nippers in a plastic bag and squeeze. And then you've got these two really nicely cut tiles there. All right, so now all of my tiles are laid out. They're all laid out. I haven't started gluing anything down yet. That is what we are going to do now. So I'm gonna pick this tile right here, and you're just gonna flip it over. You can use a popsicle stick, or you can use your finger, or you can use a toothpick or matchstick or something. And then you're just gonna spread a little bit of glue on there. You really don't need too much, just enough so that it sticks down. You aren't gonna want a ton of glue squirting out the sides. And after the glue's on there, you can just press it down on top of the plaque. Awesome, so now that that's glued down, basically you're just gonna go around and glue down everything else, just like that. So remember, you don't want glue spurting out the sides. You can just use a toothpick or a wet wipe to clean it up if it does, but otherwise, yeah, you should be good to go. So now all of my tiles are glued down. They are nice and secure. So what we are going to do is we are going to let this dry overnight, and then we are going to come back tomorrow and we are going to grout it. So we're going to fill in all of the cracks between the tiles with our grout. So that is what we're going to do tomorrow. I'm going to let it dry overnight and I will be back to finish it tomorrow. So now I'm all set up for grouting, and I'm going to go over everything that you're going to need. So you're going to need your piece, obviously, that you've been working on. You're going to need some kind of disposable placemat. We use a newspaper here at Yucandu. It's a good idea to use something disposable because it will get dirty and you probably won't want to reuse that. You'll need your grout, obviously, that's this powdery stuff. You'll need a disposable cup and a popsicle stick for mixing your grout in. You're going to need water to mix your grout with. I've just got this water from a bottle here. And then you're going to need some polishing supplies. So you'll need phone book paper and a nice cotton cloth, like this one that we have here. And it's also a good idea to have a couple toothpicks and some wet wipes on hand because this will get kind of dirty. So now we are ready to start grouting. So first I'm going to take some of my grout from this container and add it to my disposable one. You really don't need too much, just a little bit, because we're going to be mixing it in small batches and grouting just a little section at a time. And then after you've got some of your grout in the disposable cup, you just want to start adding water. I usually just do about a capful at a time, and I mix it because we want to get it to the right consistency. So the consistency that we're going for is something that is not too thick that it's crumbly and dry and everything, and it's impossible to kind of get in between these cracks, but we also don't want it to be so runny that it can pour. So we want it to be nice and spreadable, kind of like a gritty brownie batter. So it really is just a little bit of a trial and error until, whoops, my popsicle stick broke. It really is just kind of a trial and error until you get the right consistency. So if it's a little too runny, you can add more powder. And if it's a little too dry, you can add more water. So this is a consistency that I like here. You can see it's spreadable, but not too runny. So now that I've got it to this consistency, I'm going to you can take the popsicle stick, or I usually just like to take my finger and get some grout, and then we're just gonna do a little section at a time. So I'm gonna start with like this little section right here. I'm gonna use up all my grout, we're gonna polish it, and then we'll move on to the next section. And so once you've got your grout, you just want to start spreading it in between the cracks. And it is going to get all over the tops of the tiles. And that is okay. I know that's very scary because you worked very hard on the tile part of your project to make it look nice and fun and pretty. And now we're covering it up with grout. But don't be afraid because we are going to spend a lot of time polishing and cleaning it. And the goal is really to get it in between the cracks of the tiles. So some is going to get on the top, but just try and keep smoothing it out over the tops of the tiles to get in all of those cracks. And then if you've got an edge like this one right here, a good idea is to get some grout on there, and then you just take your finger and run it along the edge. So that creates a really nice beveled edge. Like that. I'll do it on this edge too so you can see it again. So just get some grout on there and then just run your finger along the edge so it fills in those cracks. So then I'm just going to continue putting my grout on until I've used up all of this first batch of grout that I have. Alright, so now that I've used up that entire first batch of grout, we are going to work on polishing this section. So the first thing you're going to do is take some phone book paper. You can fold it up a little bit. And then we're just going to start going over the tops of our tiles. Just like this. So this is going to get a bunch of the big chunks of grout off. We're going to get a bunch of big chunks of grout off of the top. And this is going to start smoothing it out for us and giving it that nice finished look. So, and you can already see that we're starting to uncover those tiles again. We're starting to get some of that dirty, ugly grout off of the top and just keep it in the cracks to make it look nice and professional. And then don't be afraid to be a little bit aggressive with this. Obviously you still want to be gentle, but we really are trying to get that grout off. And then if you're doing this, or if you're grouting, or if you're at any step along the way and a tile does pop off, that's all right, don't worry about it. You can just use a little bit of super glue or your other weld bond glue from Yucandu to stick that back down. And say like this tile popped off, I would glue it back down, and then I would grout the rest of it before I come back to this part, just so I give this some time to dry. And now that my grouted section looks something like this, something we like to do here at Yucandu, we'll take a wet wipe and we'll go over the tops of this again. And then we'll take a big brush like this and just start dusting it off. So what this does, as we put the grout on, it starts to dry, it starts to slake. Grout actually does the most drying in the first few minutes after you put it on. So this wet wipe kind of reactivates the grout. We're adding a little bit more water into it. And then we go over with the brush, and that just helps smooth it out and create a really smooth finish. So once we're at this point with our grouted section, I'm going to hold it up so you can see it a little bit better. Obviously you can see that there's still a bunch of grout on the top. It's just kind of a little bit dirty, but that's okay because we are going to be going over each tile with this cotton cloth after we finish doing the whole thing and extra polish all of them. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to continue mixing small batches of grout and doing little chunks at a time. And I'm just going to do a little chunk at a time. I'll put the grout on, I'll use the phone book paper on top of it, I'll go over with the wet wipe and my brush, and then after that I'll come back and I'll show you what we're going to do to finish polishing all the tiles. And then for a photo mosaic like this, you want to make sure that your grout is a little bit thicker when you're doing this part with the clear tiles. Because if it's too runny, it might kind of seep into those cracks underneath the glass tiles and get some like weird grout spots on your photo, and we don't want that to happen. So just make sure your grout is a little bit thicker when you're doing this part. Alright, so I am almost ready to start using that cotton cloth to extra polish things. I'm just going to go over it with the phone book paper one more time because the goal of polishing, at least this preliminary step of polishing, is to make sure you can see the corners and edges of every tile. So obviously these round ones aren't going to have corners because they're round, but it's the same idea. You want to be able to see the edges of the tile. It's not as important to get all the tops perfectly cleaned off yet. That's coming with the cotton cloth. So I'm just going to go over one more time with this phone book paper and make sure that I can see the edges and corners of each tile. Alright, and now you can see why the spacing is so important between our clear tiles on this photograph part, because you want those grout joints to be really thin so you can see as much of the photo as possible. Alright, so now that I can see the corners and edges of every tile, it is time for our final step of grouting, which is going to be polishing the tops of the tiles. So what you want to do is take your cotton cloth. You can take a popsicle stick, or I just like to use my finger sometimes, and just wrap it around to create this little tool. And then you're just going to go over the tops of every tile and really polish them. So you want them to be nice and shiny, so this project really glows. If you have a lot of bright colors, this will help make your colors really, really pop. So I'm just going to go over and individually polish every single one of my tiles. I know it seems a little tedious, but I promise you it's going to be so worth it when your project is super bright and colorful. So here it is. I have finished polishing all the tops of my tiles with that cotton cloth. Oh my goodness, I think it looks so amazing. I am so proud of you guys. I'm sure you guys have uncovered your tiles and made it look just as awesome. And so one thing we like to do before we paint the sides is we'll take sandpaper and just sand off some of the edges, especially if it got on this flat part of the edge where we want to paint. You want to be careful that you don't sand off a bunch of the edges where we put the grout, because we still want that there, but just to get some of the chunks and clumps of grout off of the edge of your piece. So now that we are all finished with this part, we are going to be ready for painting. So I'm going to clear away all of this and get set up for painting. Okay, so now I am all set up for painting. I took away that dirty newspaper and replaced it with one of our placemats here at Yucandu. I'd still recommend a table covering for the painting part. I'd just recommend getting a different one because the other one had a bunch of grout on it and everything, and you don't want any grout kind of sticking to your paint. I don't think that would create a very good look. And then I've got my paint here. I'm just using some of our paint here at Yucandu. I would recommend squeezing your paint out onto a little paper plate. I'm just using one of our palettes here. And then of course you will need your paintbrush, and then I've just got a couple wet wipes on hand just in case. So now we are ready to start painting. We are going to be painting the sides and the back of our project just to really finish it off. We are almost done, guys. The home stretch, stick with me. I'm sure your projects look really awesome at this point, but we just have to finish it off. So the first thing we're gonna do is paint these edges here. So I'm just gonna take my brush, dip it in a little bit of paint, and then line my brush up with the edge of my plaque and just pull down. So you can just line it up with the edge and pull it down, just so you don't get a bunch of paint all over your grout and your tiles on this edge here. So you're just going to keep line it up and pull it down. Line it up and pull it down. Remember, a little bit of paint does go a long way, so you shouldn't need too much paint. And if you have any big drips, just keep going over and smoothing them out. So line up with the edge and pull down. I'm just going to go over, touch up that part. So you're just going to do this all the way around the edges. After you're finished with that, we're going to paint the back. But you want to make sure your edges are nice and dry so you can handle your plaque a little bit better. So if you want to, you can dry it off with a hair dryer like we do at Yucandu, or you can just give it a few minutes to dry off before you paint the back. So I'm going to go ahead and paint all the edges of my project now. Alright, so now all the sides of my project are painted, and now it is going to be time to paint the back. So before you flip this over, you want to look at your placemat and make sure that you don't have any wet paint on there, because we don't want that getting on any of the tiles. So it doesn't look like I have any, so I'm just going to very carefully flip it over and gently place it down. And then we're just going to paint the back. So what you're going to do is get some paint on your brush, and you're just going to paint the back in long, smooth strokes. You can do this vertically like I'm doing it, or you can do it horizontally like this, but just make sure you decide to do it in one direction. You don't want to do a bunch of little strokes like this, because that won't look as nice and good and finished. This is the back, so people aren't seeing it, but I still think it's important to put some care and time and love into every part of our project. And as you're doing this, you want to make sure that you keep checking the sides for any drips. And if you do see some drips, just be sure to smooth those out with your brush and just work on painting a nice even layer. And you'll notice that our plaque has these little holes for hanging it up on. You don't need to paint the inside of those. If you did want to, you could just kind of stick your brush in there and wiggle it around until it got in there. I'm not going to paint the inside of mine, but if you did want to, you could. So I'm going to go ahead and paint the entire back of my project. When I finish painting it, I'll dry it off with a hairdryer just like I did with the sides, and then we'll be done. I'll come back and show you when I'm all finished. Alright, and here we go. My project is all finished. I dried off the back with a hairdryer, so now it is nice and dry, and we are done. Your project has been tiled and grouted and painted and everything, and I am so proud of you guys. This was a tough project, but I'm proud of you for sticking with it, and I hope your project looks awesome. I'm sure it does. You guys are great. So you can find more awesome projects like this online at yucandu.com or at our store in Webster Groves. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have an awesome day.